Hi guys, today we are going to talk about solving quadratics by factoring. So, before we begin, we need to talk about an important property called the zero product property. The zero product property says that if we have two things that are multiplied together, that's an A and a B, and those two things when multiplied give us 0, then either A has to equal 0 or B has to equal 0. Okay, so how does that help us? Well, let's say I have x minus 1 times x plus 3, and that equals 0. In order to solve this, if I know two things that multiply together that are 0, then one or the other has to be 0. So we can look at this as my A, which then means that x minus 1 needs to equal 0 as per the A equals 0. And if I look at this as my B, then x plus 3 needs to equal 0 because B has to be 0 as well. So now I can go through and solve each equation individually. And according to this, my two possible solutions are x equals 1 and x equals negative 3. So I could check these. And if I wanted to check these, I'm just going to check them. I would take x equals 1 and I would substitute it in. So 1 minus 1 times 1 plus 3, does that give me 0? 1 minus 1 is 0. 1 plus 3 is 4. So 0 times 4 is 0. I know that works. And I could do the same thing with negative 3. If I check negative 3 minus 1 times negative 3 plus 3 to see if it equals 0, I get negative 4 times 0 equals 0, which we know 0 equals 0. So we know that works. Okay, now how does that help us? Let's go to the next page. All right, so let's say I have a problem, and this problem asks you to solve, I didn't mean to use red, solve the equation y equals 2x plus 1, x minus 5. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is we need to set the equation equal to 0. So I want to set this equation equal to 0, meaning I want to replace y with 0. So I am going to do 0 equals 2x plus 1 times x minus 5. Okay, there's one little side note with this. If we're going to set it equal to 0, we want the ax squared term to be positive. Now, this isn't in the right format for this particular problem, but we'll look at one where we need to change it. Ax squared term needs to be positive. And I'm going to abbreviate that. All right. The next thing that I need to do is I need to factor. Well, this is already in its factored form, so I don't have to worry too much about that. And third thing that I need to do is I need to use the zero product property. That's that property from the page before. Okay, so to use the zero product property, I'm going to set up two equations. Make sure you set up these two equations every time so we don't get too jumbled up in our signs. So I have 2x plus 1 equals 0 and x minus 5 equals 0. All right, so I am going to start solving. So if I go through the good algebra, I'm going to subtract 1 from each side. Then I'm going to divide by 2 on each side, and I get x equals negative 1/2 for that first answer. Now I'm going to go to the second equation, and I'm going to add 5 to both sides so I can get x by itself. So x equals positive 5. My solution set to this problem is x equals 5 and x equals negative 1/2. Okay, let's go on. So let's say this problem didn't look like factored form. Let's say it looks like x squared minus 5x minus 14. Okay, so the first step we need to do is we need to set this equal to 0. So I'm going to do 0 equals x squared minus 5x minus 14. Well, the next thing I need to do is I need to get it to a form that looks like I can use zero product property, which means it needs to be an intercept form. And to get it in an intercept form, I need to factor. So whether you choose to do the diamond and look for two numbers that multiply to negative 14 and add to negative 5, or you have some other method of factoring, use it. So I know the two numbers that multiply to negative 14 and add to negative 5 would be negative 7 and positive 2. Please, please make sure that you write the factored form before we try to solve. So I have x minus 7 times x plus 2 equals 0. And now the third step says I can use the zero product property. So x minus 7 equals 0. Oh goodness. And x plus 2 equals 0. And I'm going to solve. So the first equation I'm going to add 7 to both sides, and I get x equals 7. And the next equation I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides and get x equals negative 2. So my two solutions are x equals 7 and x equals negative 2. All right, let's go on. So what happens if it doesn't quite look like the form we want it to be in? So let's say, for example, the problem says x squared equals, let's do 2x minus or plus 3. Let's say this is what my equation looks like, and I'm telling you to solve this. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to set it equal to 0, but I want to keep my x squared term positive. So I need to move the 2x and the 3. I need to move the 2x over, I need to move the 3 over, because I want x squared to be positive. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. Now are x squared and 2x alike? No. So all I can say is x squared minus 2x equals 3. And then I'm going to move the 3 over as well, again noting that it's not a like term with x squared or negative 2x. So I have x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. So now I have made the equation equal to 0, and I've kept x squared positive. So now I need to factor. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 3 that add to negative 2. So my answer would be negative 3 and positive 1. Let's just erase that and put that back as a positive 1. All right. So I would write into my factored form x minus 3 times x plus 1 equals 0. And then I would use the zero product property that says x minus 3 equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. And I'm going to solve each equation individually. So I get x equals positive 3 and x equals negative 1. And there are your two solutions to this solving quadratics by factoring.